And now let's give a warm penny welcome to David Sisler.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate that very much. And thank you, Bob, for that warm introduction. It's good to be with Bob and Martha again. As he said, we met on the Zider Dam a couple of years ago. We've stayed in contact over the years, and I was honored and thrilled when he contacted me and said, would you speak at this series of lectures when we're honoring our folks. I'm going to, well, let me put this slide up and introduce you to the family. Bonnie and I have been married since August the 24th, 1968, which is putting us on track for 52 years. It's not a record, but it's a pretty good average. And God has blessed us with 4 kids, 3 kids-in-law, 10 grandkids, and I'm not sure the right designation for Gabe. Will he be the 11th grandkid? I guess so. The family's gathered here on Christmas morning, and if you do the count, you'll only see 9 there. I initially said we have 10. And Gabe had come into the family after this picture was taken. Mike and Ivy, who are sitting in the back beside of me, had a precious little boy named Thomas who was only with us for 9 days. And he lives eternally with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Although he is not physically with us, he is one of our grands, and I always say we have 10 grandkids. If you do the count, you'll come up one short. And then Mike and Ivy have assumed legal custody for her nephew. Bad situation, bad home life, bad lots of stuff, and he's now in a home where there's values and there's stability, and so he's grand number 11. Now, before I go any further, those of you who are close enough, you can see I'm holding in my hand a little object that I'm unwrapping, and you're too far away to see that it says Halls on the outside. And this is a Halls sugar-free cough drop, which goes right here. Put it right there. It does 2 things. One, it keeps my throat lubricated so that I don't do a lot of humming, which I've been doing already today. So I've been working greasing the throat. The second thing it does is time my talks. I'm a retired United Methodist pastor. We started out in ministry when we were first married in the Church of God, headquarters in Cleveland, Tennessee, and we served in that denomination and in other Pentecostal or charismatic denominations for 17 years. Then we moved out of the parsonage, and Paul sold tents, I sold diamonds as my share. Bonnie's retired math teacher. He taught mathematics in high school and college for 30 years. But when we started out, Bonnie would give me signals. If she couldn't hear me, she'd go like this. Bon, wave at him. She's sitting back here. There's my bride. She would give me signals. This was, I'm not speaking loud enough. This was, I was too loud. And this was, I was too long. Well, we did a lot of traveling preaching in those early days, and I'd go to places where folks were generous, they were kind, they were loving, and I'd look at my watch to see how I'm doing time-wise. And they said, David, don't pay any attention to your watch, just preach, let the Spirit have His way. And I don't know about you, and I've not been in service with you before for worship service, so I'm saying this from total innocence. But about a 20-minute sermon's pretty good. Longer than that, the derriere wears out and the brain doesn't connect, and it kind of goes away. And so I found some wintergreen lozenges, not lifesavers with a hole in them, and I keep them in my pocket. And as I got up to go to the pulpit, I just casually slip one in. I didn't go to a big deal like I did with you. And it would melt in about 20 minutes. And when it's melted, that's it. Amen. The sermon's done. Well, one Sunday morning, I am preaching and preaching and preaching, and I'm thinking to myself, is this thing never going to dissolve? I'm wearing myself out let alone the good folks out there listening to me. And I discreetly coughed into my hand, and I looked, and it was a button. Cub Scouts honor, true story. It was a button. We'd still be there because that thing wasn't going to dissolve. Well, the halls will do about 45 minutes, and when it's done, I'm done. After the talk is over, I'm going to come down front, and if you have questions, comments, suggestions, if I've made a mistake, and I'm prone to do that, share those questions, share those thoughts with me. I'll be glad to talk to you. And then tomorrow night, we're going to do another one called History, It's What's for Dinner. This talk is about a hurricane, a shipwreck that leads to the building of one colony, the saving of another colony, and the writing of one of the most famous pieces of literature, one of the most famous plays in the world. Tomorrow, History, It's What's for Dinner, I'm going to talk about the way the things we eat and drink have literally changed history. And I go back to prehistoric times when we were hunter-gatherers and take you up through the destruction of the Berlin Wall and a little bit on beyond that, how the things we eat and drink have changed history. So, I think I've covered the introductory material. If I've forgotten something, ask me after we're done. If you want to know more detail, I'll talk your leg off. I'm a professional talker. You've met the family. Let's get going with Tempest in the Atlantic. Our story begins with a writer by the name of William Strachey. We are in the early 17th century. We are in the first years of the 1600s. Strachey's dad died and left the family a pretty good estate. Strachey didn't want to work the estate. He didn't want to be in another type of employment. He wanted to be a writer. I've been a newspaper columnist. I've been a magazine editor. I know what a tough world it is to make a living at. Strachey was very limited in his opportunities. Pretty decent writer, as you'll learn a little bit as we go along. But getting an opportunity to do the kind of writing that would pay a salary, that would keep the family going, keep the estate going, was difficult. The estate is running out of money because he's not bringing anything in. He gets a job as the assistant to the ambassador going to Turkey. It's a great opportunity to do writing, to do a journal, to do a record, to do a travel book, which at that time was a big seller. Fiction didn't sell, nonfiction did. Travel books were one of the greatest things to produce. He gets to Turkey, gets involved in a political discussion. He's on the wrong side of the issue, and the ambassador sends him home. Once he gets home, he hears about an opportunity that will become the basis of our story today. The Virginia Company is getting ready to send the third supply to their Jamestown colony. England got in the colony business late. They had watched Spain, they had watched Portugal go over with the Catholic faith and make converts for the Catholic Church and find the riches of the New World and bring them back to Spain and Portugal. England gets into it late. And they send a colony to Jamestown, what will become Jamestown, in May of 1607. 100 colonists to start that colony. It's a difficult situation. It's a bad time to be setting up a colony in the New World, in this part of the New World. And the Virginia Company has to send supplies back to keep the colony going. We're going to talk this afternoon about the third supply. And the third supply that the Virginia Company puts together, well, before I'm ahead of myself. They were late into the colony business. You see this statement from a Spanish soldier 15:20 said, "We came here to serve God and to get rich." I'm not sure which one was the most important. I think I know what was the most important. But as they get ready to go, they want to send Protestant missionaries, because it's been all the Catholic Church and they've been winning all the souls and building all the churches. One of the Protestant ministers that goes, not connected with our story, but because I'm a retired Methodist preacher, and I started to tell you this and I forgot where I was, left the pulpit after 17 years, went into jewelry business for 17 years, went back into pastoring, and back into pastoring was as a Methodist pastor. Well, you're looking at John Wesley, who was preaching to the locals, to the first residents in Georgia. John Wesley gets in trouble because of a woman. You Methodists who know the history know the name Susan Hopkey. John Wesley was attracted to her. There was nothing untoward going on between the two of them, but she had eyes for William Williamson and married him. Wesley was heartbroken and hurt by it. They come to church one Sunday morning after the wedding. It's Communion Sunday, and he won't serve them. The good folks there in Georgia, around the Savannah area, take unkindly to that. They find an old feather pillow. They find a bucket of tar, a long pole. John Wesley gets word that there's a tar and feather party heading his way. He gets on ship and heads back to England just ahead of the tar and feather party. On board, he meets the Moravians. You know the story. It's stormy weather. The Moravians have incredible faith. They don't seem to be bothered by this. When he gets back to London, he will go to a place called Aldersgate, where he finds his heart strangely warmed. Well, England wants to get into the ministry aspect as well. So resources and ministry are the reasons for the colonies to be founded. And you're looking at the cover of the brochure for the third supply. They are trying to attract people to go to Jamestown to reinforce the colony, because they only started out with 100, and there's been some problems over the years from 1607 to when this is going to go in 1609. And they advertise, this is a place where you can go. Let me get the good pointer that Paul gave to me. They exciting all such as be well affected to further the fame. And the brochure is full of advertising. No sense telling the truth when you can do a good advertising campaign. They talk about all the furs that are being gathered, all the timber that's being harvested. And they say we're going to supply England with both of these within a matter of a year or two. The colony's barely surviving, but the brochure says there's money to be made. Come on and go with us. And the critics of the venture will make certain comments like, well, they talk about all the gold there, why their handcuffs for their prisoners are gold, and their chamber pots are gold. They do put together a company of 500 folks who say they want to go to Jamestown on this third supply mission. Also, a number of professional sailors who goes with them. And the third supply has a number of ships that go out. The Sea Venture is the flagship. It's a brand new ship. This is her first voyage. Also the Diamond. Oh, it was a Diamond Princess. It was in trouble a while ago. I just thought of that. The Falcon, the Blessing, the Unity, and the Lion. And there was a small ketch that didn't have a name that held about 30 people and was towed behind the Sea Venture. And as I said, 500 colonists and 160 professional sailors are going to make this venture. They leave out from London on the Sea Venture, which, as you can see, is 100 feet long and grosses 300 tons. The last time I did this talk on board ship, I was on the Anthem of the Seas, and I always change this picture for the ship I'm on to give a comparison, you can see 1,139 feet and almost 170,000 gross tons. You could take the Sea Venture at 100 feet long, put it across the beam of the Anthem of the Seas, the widest part, and you'd have about 30 feet on either side to walk around. These were brave folks to get in these small vessels and take a journey that could take up to 2 months to get where they wanted to go. But off they go. The 3 key people on board the Sea Venture were the 3 key people for the colony, for what they're going to do. Thomas Gates, who's going to become the new governor of the colony. Admiral Sir George Somers, who was the fleet admiral and the captain of the Sea Venture, Christopher Newport. Newport's making his 3rd trip. It'll be his last trip. He'll retire from the work after this. These 3 men, the 3 key leaders of the venture, are all on board the flagship. Now today they wouldn't let that happen. If you've got the president and the vice president of a corporation, they don't fly on the same plane. When the president gives the State of the Union address, one person is kept out in case of a disaster that kills everybody. The top people were all on board this ship. It's an incredible risk that you'll see happening in just a moment. They go out with the blessing. God bless them and guide them to His glory and our good. They start out and all is well. I'm going to skip just a little bit and give you a little bit of shipboard life. If you've been on a cruise ship, well, you ain't seen nothing yet as to what goes on board a ship like this. This is an actual sailor's outfit from the 16th century, and the professional sailors typically had one outfit. When it wore out, they'd get another one. And they had a rule on board this venture that the professional sailors had to have 2 outfits. And they said that the reason was for the preservation of health and to avoid nasty beastliness. Bonnie and I go on a cruise, each of us with a suitcase full of stuff. Here you have a law that says your professional sailors must take an extra change of clothes. And the colonists would have had more than that, of course. But taking a bath in those days was just not heard of. There's no way you take all your clothes off and wash all of your body. Maybe once a year, not then if you can get away with it. And so you understand the beastliness part of it. So to immerse your whole body in water and do this, unthinkable. So they pass a law to make it just a little bit better. Here's the washing machine. You'd get up salt water out of the ocean, and you'd wash your clothes in it, or you'd wash yourself in it. And if you've ever gone swimming in the ocean, you know that the salt makes you itchy, so you're washing in the salt water. If you want to go to the facilities on board, please don't think I'm being crude. If you were a gentleman, you would go to where the wind was at your back and point out to sea and take care of number 1. Otherwise, you would find some container and you would urinate in that container. Ladies were allowed some modesty to have a container, and they would put this in the stairs in case there's a fire. You have a liquid to put out the fire. You can imagine the aroma as these things collect. And it used to be on board these ships that if you wanted to do number 2, you had a rope that you held on to. You put your feet up on the rail of the rope. You lean down over the side of the ship with your pants down and your hiney shining for everybody to see. It took care of the business. Folks, it wasn't it wasn't a cruise like we do today. And here you see the actual toilets from a ship similar to the Sea Venture. These are the toilets. There's part of the toilet seat on this one. This is an actual historical vessel. They would cut slots in the bottom so that the refuse would slide out into the bottom of the ship here. This is in the forward part of the ship, so the wind's at your back. The odor is hopefully going to be blown out to sea. And the waves that slosh in and out will flush the toilet. So this is what they set out in. This is first class accommodations, folks. This is where the which of which there is no whicher go. And food on board was kind of limited. You have a certain amount of storage. You have a certain amount of space. And one of the key things were these biscuits, sometimes called hardtack, that had 3 ingredients: flour, salt, and water. Mix them together and bake them till they're hard as a brickbat. When you want to eat it, you have to dip it into some kind of liquid. And because it's too hard, you bite it, you're going to break your teeth. That way it preserved, it stays. And as the voyage gets longer, you look along these cracks. And if you see holes, you pick it up and shake it. If it rattles, you turn it so the holes are upside down and shake it, so the creatures that are in there will drop out. If they're yellow or green or brown, you go ahead and eat it. If they're white, there's no nutrition left, there's no nutrients left in it. You carve it into a belt buckle or make buttons out of it. It's not good to eat anymore. This was one of the main things they had on board to eat. If they had fresh food, they would consume that within a few first days of the sailing, because it just wouldn't last.